Okay, I was sent this in a link here recently, and I've had two different people send me not the same thing, but pretty much the same topic and the same demeanor lately, and it follows up me going through the series that I talked about Proto-Indo-Europeans and so on, and I was doing a much more ancient time and then leading up into what you would think of as biblical times, if you will, of Jesus and so on, and then through the Old Testament times of what was going on also. But the there's a strange trend that's going on that didn't used to be in effect in any way, and see if you see the strangeness in this. This is released by Christians for Truth. It's a Christian organization that had put out newsletters and things in the past, and to thwart lies that is trying to ruin Christianity and its origins and people that were involved with it, they've decided to come out with information that would not pertain as you think of to Christianity, but it actually does, and some of the people definitely do, but also it refutes some people who are eventually against Christianity and things, so you can see the reason and motives perhaps for their doing it. And this is not the only one. The Christians for Truth is not the only one doing this in any way, shape, or form. And but I don't look into much of this because, again, see, it goes all apologetic and all that type of stuff, and you get to this point where you realize that they still have their Christian agenda that they have to keep up with, and then because of that they have to have, because that only is in effect if the Old Testament's in effect, so they have to keep this facade up while they talk about everything else that went on, and it makes it kind of difficult, and they can't usually get into too deep of subjects. But sometimes in these, what they'll do is they'll just point out, like, well, isn't that special? They'll just, here's this doctor someone, and he's well renowned, and he says da da da, and it makes it sound like some 700 Club type thing. But and you realize, if you've ever watched that, they've shown how geared those people are, and how it's real politically geared and everything else. It doesn't have anything really to do with the Christianity effect of it, except for that he just keeps invoking the Lord all the time, and Pat Roberts and all that. So you look at this, and this is supposed to have been this meeting of the Scythians and the Mongols, and it's one of the tapestries of it. There are lions up under the bottom of this thing across here. There's a horse down. This apparently was the horseman, and now he's off to fight. He's got a sword, but it can't be seen right there, and he's kind of hidden behind a crescent shield that could pretty much protect him real good, especially at horsemanship and like jousting, with just his eyes being able to look through that little area, so more covered or whatever. And it does look like an eclipsing moon, and he's got a Phrygian type cap. Yeah, and so this is supposed to be the Scythians fighting the Mongols, but he's got a Scythian cap, but the Phrygian style that we talk about. So does he, but his apparently has a front guard on it that looks like you could pull it down over his face, and it would have been somewhat armored except for the chin and stuff. One of those styles that just does the eyes and such. Though this guy doesn't have any. He's got this long mullet hair, chin beard, mustache, and he's very Caucasian. But this is Scythians. But people have noted using this piece on about 10 different things that I've looked into, other than talking about horsemanship and how horses were all brought back and everything else. But this man here, his outfit of this Scythian is very much a gi. Just like in Japan and stuff, this is folded over to this point, this is folded over, and you can see how they crisscross and the way it looks at the bottom of it. And these people are wearing pants. Boots and pants, basically. And although he doesn't look fully armored, he's got scale armor, breastplate on, and his pants look like somewhat regular pants, but strangely when he gets to his legs, he has a whole boot and everything with a hinge in it that looks like it's made out of modern scale armor for his leggings. Now the one we're going to get into, and I cannot do this in one video and not even a simple series. This is going to take a bit if I go totally into it. So we're going to use this man's little key point notes to go through the ideals that's trying to be presented here. It is Genghis Khan and the Mongol invaders were white Scythians and a variation of the Scythians. Now, when we say that, what we have to envision the fact of when the Greeks were talking about Sarmatians and Scythians, that they're just as much Caucasian as that you would say the Greeks and the Romans were, right? It's just variations on a theme. But at times Scythians go all the way to China, and at times the Scythians are there around the Black Sea and so on and everything. Well, in reality, the answer is yes, for they were all the way through China at one time, and the Tarim Basin mummies, and there are pyramids there that we really should investigate for all of humanity, including them and so on, but they're steered away from it from a reason which hopefully I can get into a little bit in this video on one of his key points. And a lot of people avoid this because it makes the modern Western Eastern dissension of Russian people of the Northern Hemisphere and all of Western civilization. And then we still have that problem with America being seen as a Western civilization, and then go with more of that. So it's almost East versus West, or East meets West. But oddly, East meets West in your mind instantly means Orientals are coming for dinner. And no, not necessarily so. And Mongols, then, what are Mongols? Well, they're Orientals, aren't they? They look kind of Oriental. Well, they have a lot of that now from the China influence later, but what did they look like before? And then they look like they have a little Eskimo thing too, but doesn't that have that same influence? But then what were those people originally, and who are these people in this area, and what's this whole Mongol invasion that's supposed to be the big giant thing that dwarfed even Alexander the Great or the Great Persian conflict at one time, who owned the great part of the world? Well, those two last ones we just said right there are definitely Caucasians and said to be part of the Aryan race, but all those Scythians and things are too. In fact, it's where the name comes from, and going into India and all the things. But what about these Mongols? That's something totally different. Well, let's just start getting into the points here real quick. In the West, it is taken as historical fact that Genghis Khan and the Mongol invaders of Europe from the East were racial Asians, and by Asians they meant Orientals, and that Mongol separate thing, like Caucasian, Asian, Mongoloid, Negroid, and there's that difference that's there. However, the notion that they were Asian didn't arise until the 18th century in Western Europe. It seems, if you look into it, the Russians themselves has actually never believed it. And there's no evidence whatsoever that the Mongolian people themselves ever believed it, or the people that we call Mongols today. And, the people that you would think of that look kind of half Tibetan, half Chinese, and they wear hats and do throat singing and that type of stuff. Those guys, they don't seem to have believed it either. So this seems to be something that's definitely pushed on the West, and it's one part of a division of Russia versus the West and all these things, and it's always been something like that. And then they make up names like the Cold War, and I keep telling you, everything kind of goes with this. And you're like, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, like all this stuff I study in old times and then stuff that's happening now, oh, well, it's deja vu and stuff. Well, it gives me a feeling of deja vu whenever I check it all out or find things, but oh, well, history repeats itself. No, it goes deeper than that. It actually goes deeper than that, and a lot of it is forced, very much so, brought forth by propaganda. So this little checklist we're looking at, Dr. Matthew Raphael Johnson has done a recent podcast where he goes into fascinating detail debunking this long-held legend, where there recently are a small number of Europeans with some Asiatic admixture and did not come from this mythical Mongol invasion. So the people that, what he's saying just simply there is these people that we see that have a little bit of admix into this one area, and they go, oh, well, it was this great Mongol invasion. And they go, well, boy, they sure did a lot of damage here with this little da-da-da, and then the Turkish people with their little look, and that's really almost the same to what we're trying to correspond to this giant thing that may have never even happened that way. Yeah. Dr. Johnson makes the following points, and let's just look through these, and it's real important, and each one is not just something like meh. So, no evidence of Mongol Empire in northern China. No. No, in fact, it looks like the Asiatics that we were talking about and the Tarim Basin people were overrulers of China and got it started, and they were the ones that had a yin and yang symbol and stuff. And in fact, there are Chinese stories of it and everything, but I'm not going to go into that in this one. But pyramids, it all goes with it and everything, and it shows that some people had an assistance. Looks like very much like the Aryans that helped out India, yeah, and all these other people. And you want to see a distracted view of it, you could see what's going on in South or Sub-Saharan Africa and everything, and what's been done to help primitive people from there. Not to say the Chinese were that primitive or whatever at that time, but yeah. Now you can see there are great people now and everything. Nothing against them held in any way, but there's no evidence that these Mongols lived in that area. For if we just look at the videos that I've talked recently about findings in graves and going with Proto-Indo-Europeans, then where the hell are these Mongolian people? They're not in Mongolia. They're not here. Oh, well, they must be more east and more north. No, not unless you're going to get up into it, way up Kamchatka and get up into Aleutian lands and stuff and get, way up cresting over China. What the hell? Okay. So another point. No Mongolian histories give credence to the theory. That might hit some of you strange, but hold on a second. If you look at Mongolian history, they don't have the history that some Mongolian group all of a sudden grew to 50 times its size inside of 2 generations, and then all of a sudden just went out and yeehaw took over the west of this Silk Road thing. In fact, the Silk Road was running through these ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans and stuff and everything in there, and it yet predates the Silk Road too. That wasn't anything new. That was somewhat of a direct attachment, and then we've got this story now, right? Just like they thought the world was flat or whatever, and we know lots of people knew the world was round, and you weren't going to fall off it like a book or whatever, like try to be told, but that's another one. Russians have never believed this thesis, and that shows up. Yeah, and it shows up in the Russians that I've seen and talked to about these type of subjects. And like Vlad, the guy that I get the things off of, he runs right through there in the area. And I'd really be interested in what he would do on the Tartars and so on and everything that I've hinged upon, but I haven't totally gotten into, because when we get into that, that exposes this whole situation. For how could you have this and this and this great Mongol empire that went on, and then the remnant of it is just these people with this slight amount of admix in this one area? That doesn't sound like... That's a fish story. The communism is a red herring. But they tell you that not one single Asian skeleton is found in Russia. And by Asian, they mean Oriental. And or even the Mongolians that you think of today. and it would have had that descriptive Mongolian head structure. And people that we were told about it. In a recent video I did, I talked about how whenever I was picking a teacher's head apart about it in the ancient Proto-Indo-Europeans and Scythians and stuff, and how they led in. We were talking about Russia, early Russia, and how Rus was just way over here near Poland, and then there was this Cossacks and everything. And then whenever I got there, she just kind of shut me down like I just went too far, mister. And it was just strange how she was so excited until that moment, and it geared me into wanting to learn about it and change and figure it out and everything. And that story of Mulan is very telling in an idea like this. And then you think that the movies are trying to dissuade from it, but a lot of times in movies they'll have stuff that actually, like I said, is in your face in some way. For that old Tom Cruise movie where he's the last samurai or whatever, or better yet, that Great Wall of China movie where it had what's his name in it, the white guy, and he's helping out and he's having to do something. Now of course they pull it into this idea that there's these dragons and they have great weapons and power and all these things, but we could take that in another video probably back into something, give you a little more reality also. There's no contemporary source that describes Mongols as Asian. In contemporary 13th century paintings show Mongols and Rus looking the same racially. And so that whole definite look, while the clothes look somewhat different and something looks a little Guy-ish, and the Tarim Basin mummies look like everybody's wearing something like Hugh Hefner pajamas that are just more densely made or something off of it. These people, well, that's silk pajamas people, and these people over here have it going on for this time. The Cossacks were called Tartars, but Tartar has a larger reference even than this. For Tartarus is supposedly, in looking at old maps, the same maps that you'd see Russia is just a little area over there by Poland, kind of, would show Tartaria as being a huge area, looking like this Proto-Indo-European land, and where these Mongols must have been, but it's not. And then Tartarus is supposed to be Spain, ancient Spain. And there's more to that too. Tartar sauce. Isn't that for seafood? Cream of tartar. Well, cream, so it was like what they used for milk. No, you make an essence of it cream, so you skim it off. It's never mind, but it has to do with special words. Words sometimes give away the truth. Mongol comes from the Greek word meaning great, and in fact it means, in a way, solo great or sun great. And so, like, from the sun in a sense also, people have said in a few ways, but yeah, just really much great, like Gaul meant big, huge, and great, and Sumerian and so on. Contemporary sources describe Mongols as white men, or definite Caucasians. What you would probably think of as being, you wouldn't call it European. We'll call it Russian then. Would it look more like that? For that's really the same people. We keep trying to put this border right there in between and go, okay, they're there. And I'm sure there's been lots of mixing and everything, but one can look at Jean-Luc Picard and then look at the guy that runs Russia right now at Putin and see too many similarities. And then the idea of Kennewick Man and all types of things, and people have connections, and they're all Caucasians here. So let's just go on. Genghis Khan is said in far too many accounts to have had red hair and gray eyes, and in some accounts it says blue eyes. In fact, his name of Muchin, whenever he was younger, signifies this in some way, and his wife's name also. portrays it into this idea that's been given. And so, while he may have led a group and been over a group of what we would call Mongoloid people today, that isn't that Mongol horde of these great horsemen, nomadic barbarian horsemen that we think of today. And the people that had yurts of old were those, well, Proto-Indo-Europeans. And we got to say Proto-Indo-European so we don't say Russian, but then what are they? That's the same damn thing. Very little variation. It's not like they're from Mars in any way. And people, and there's so much propaganda and everything. Sometimes people can't just step aside and say, okay, well, if you took off the accent and the beard, if you took the beard off Ayatollah Khomeini, he'd be Sean Connery. Take the turban off. Mongols were Scythians from eastern Russia and in Siberia, and the Altaish type people and around through there. And that's what they're described as, and that's Scythians. Rus is in that map, and it's more eastern, not necessarily Poland, but over in there, trying to give everybody away. Slavs, Avars, and Scythians used to be interchangeably used pretty much, and where Slavics came from. So what if they had a Turkic influence that came in later and everything, but at that time, and then the name slave comes from that too for other reasons, and I'm not going to make this a 20 episode video by keep going on. He's got quite a few markers. A lot of the things that I've said already pretty much are this is just clarification. Marco Polo referred to the Scythians. Yeah, the Silk Road, Marco Polo. Yeah. And if you look into the tales of that and everything, and who it's talking about, Cossacks are the closest descendants of the Mongols. That's this guy's key point. And then you look at the Cossacks, and strangely, they look like they almost have a Cro-Magnon effect into them. They're a bigger kind of guy. I don't know. Let's just piss off everybody that's listening and say, you know how Iceland's got these big old meaty corn-fed boys, and Texas does too, but up there in the Cossacks, they can be quite gaunt and tall and big and everything, and yeah, but more in Siberia, where you would probably think the Western Front in Russia would be something like, they're going to send you off to Siberia, right? You ever play Risk? In Siberian Kamchatka Peninsula and up there. Anyhow. Only the Scythians had an empire large enough to field such an army. And that's one of those key points where you can go, okay, look, just facts. You're expecting to have this many people and a huge thing that comes swathing over, and it ain't no swathing over. It's a huge bunch of people, and coming through them, they grabbed a bunch of them along with some of these other guys and came in a big wave. And it wasn't even led by who we're told to be led by, and what's going on with this. And there's a lot of things like that, though. You come to find out that Gautama Buddha actually was said to have been a darker red-haired man with blue eyes, and they show him so whenever they show statues of the Buddha quite often, still in temples and areas that the people don't have blue eyes. But also, even the descriptions of him talk about him not having slanty eyes, but they talk about him having bulging eyes, which to a bunch of slant-eyed people could be a description, just like saying slant-eyed people from people that have bulging eyes. There's so many of these things. I've showed little clips where you can go up into those ancient Hindu temples and they climb up in the top of that one that they blew the face off of, like ISIS is doing now and all that stuff, and they show you that, yeah, trapped up under the soot, these guys are blonde and red-haired people, They look a lot like that Tartar basin. I put that together in that video and even showed a Buddhist temple that has blue-eyed gods all over the walls and stuff. What? Orthodox Church benefited from the Mongol occupation. Man, it helped Orthodox Church definitely get going through Russia. And in later waves making that happen too, but that's much later. And then Bolsheviks and all these things that happened that tried to ruin it all. And Tsar Nicholas and Anastasia and what had happened to certain people. But I'm not going to go into that deep too. But Muscovites welcomed the Mongol occupation. Well, that's kind of like Alexander was welcomed into Egypt. But who are Muscovites? Well, that's the people that were in Moscow at the time. I don't know. See, we keep thinking of things a lot of times on the terms they are now, and while it's easier now to think of it the way that it was then, because USSR pretty much disintegrated into its all Czechoslovakia and Poland, all those little, sub-states, but it's just literally the people that were near Moscow at the time, and not calling themselves the Rus, who were east over there of them. And it wasn't the Sarmatians who were down south of them, and it wasn't the Scythians that were all around them and to the east that other people had talked about. Anti-Russian writer concocted the Asian Mongol theory. And that one is pretty much what you could write a whole thesis on, where he's telling you that anti-Russian writers and people like I was telling you about the Cold War and all that type of stuff, and it's in your face with that name Cold War too, but the anti-Russian writers concocted the Asian Mongol theory to dissuade from it and put a third person in the situation as if being, oh, not me, him, in a way. No Asian artifacts from the Mongol occupation actually exist. What? No. What they find is a bunch of Scythian metalwork and all that type of stuff, and the burials and the Isaac and Kurgan burials and so on. And this is all one big wave that they didn't know, because later the Isaacsons and sons Sakasuni come over, and that's Saxons, and that actually happened in two separate waves too. So how could they come over twice? Well, they didn't all come over. When we're playing that old Red Rover game when we were a kid, there's people over here and people over there, and Red Rover, let Jimmy come over, and Jimmy comes over. But the rest of them are still there. And while there might have been a large migration of people that had grown to be too large for their area, like the Sumerians had done it a few times, like a few other places have done a few times, and then whenever everything got drought, they were seeded back perhaps to greener pastures. Okay, Sarmatians were Proto-Slavic peoples. I've done another video recently about Mithra, and it talked about these people here, and he goes into it too in that. But yeah, they were there before in the Slavic area, before the Slavic people were there. You can say it's that Poland area and all around too. So like the Rus and all these people around it. I wish I could just pull up the map right now that shows you kind of like that. They're just right there, and it's the difference of somebody saying, here's Spain, here's Italy, or whatever, here's Poland, here's Yugoslavia, but let's continue. Mongols used Scythian metalwork. Well, I talked about that a second ago. Yeah, so the artifacts and the things they find from that, all the stuff that goes with it, is Scythian stuff. And then there's symbologies from that. But then again, you could expect that the people, that if they'd been under them from so long, they'd have similar symbology, as I've shown you in so many other videos, and how symbology passes around from something as simple and as archaic as the swastika until a modern time, which all of a sudden got somebody just put the slap on that. And so there really doesn't appear to be much short of diddly squat that shows you anything of the level that people are being led to believe to a modern day. And in fact, the people don't seem to be the people that they're talking about. And even the people themselves that they're talking about having done this don't agree that it happened. But there's more. The Eastern Scythians were dominant in China. And that's a simple statement, but again, we have an effect like the Aryans helping out the ancient people of India, where you have them helping out China. Not that they didn't have it going on like I was speaking of before, but these Eastern Scythians were dominant in China and helped out, and they had made these giant pyramids and did everything else, and then left the culture. Right? We can kind of see that now, but they found those mummies and they talked about it, but now they want to cover it back up. Like, oh no. Well, why oh no? Well, because most of these pyramids date to right around and before the forming of anything and stuff. And I've talked about Mahujin and a few stories that go along with that recently, but so says you can listen to this fascinating lecture here on archive.org, but it's not on there anymore. It got knocked off right off the bat. And also embedded below, but that's something different. He begins talking about the Mongol myth at 27 minutes of the podcast. Update the podcast. Here's been removed, but here's a video, and this is a different video that's here. Now in this video it shows you a symbology, and it's the double-headed bird and a symbol of Tartaria and a cracked egg and east and west and all these things that go with it, and a guy behind her head now riding on a white horse. Let me see if I can do this real quick. If I mute the TV, I can start it playing again. And you can see the cavalier on the white horse. And you'll see him trampling the dragon. I can't get too much closer. Yeah, there we go. And so, yeah, there's this Fabergé looking egg, right? You see that double-crowned eagles? Got in his claws and sacred, but it's black eagle type thing. Oh, well, there's more to that, but this right here, this man on a horse, white horse, is trampling under a dragon and stabbing it, and that's St. George kills the dragon. What? Yeah, that's that same symbology. Like I tell you, it just keeps floating around and showing up over different places. So, but that video is somebody else talking about it. And then they have another similar video, but that's somebody else talking about it. And I got to 10 minutes and 40 seconds, decided to stop. But it's a radio thing that they talk about. And he does go into the information. Interestingly, whenever I went down just to see if there's anything lower, I get 3 different stories right here in one thing that pulls up. Italy vows to expel 100,000 African invaders. Yeah, that's all the people that invaded in because they're hanging around everywhere and stuff and causing rampant crime and big problems. And of course, you know, they're not wanted in there. But then at the same time, the second one is migrant style. Benetton uses African invaders to sell clothing. What? And then there's an ad that are showing black people and white people, black men, white girls, black men, white girls, black men, white girls, all hanging around together. What? And then a bunch of white girls wearing this clothing that Benetton makes. Okay, and it's just pastel colors. Well, what's that got to do with Africa? Nothing. But well, then what is it? Well, here's the third story. Spain gives undocumented African invaders unlimited access to free health care. And whenever you look into that, you find out that they gave them all these clothes, as it's showing right here, along with food and care packages and everything, and it's done cost them over $2.5 million before now, and they're saying it's too much, we can't handle it, and it's accelerating up to where it's going to cost them $4 or $5 million, and they can't be the welfare of these people and try to do all of this, and at the same time all this crime's going through the roof. So then it looks like that becomes full circle, because they gave them a little bit of clothes and show Caucasian hospitality, but you gotta go. Italy vows to expel 100,000 African invaders. Wow. In the comments, there's the lecture has been removed from the archive org. It's not clear why. This sounds to me like it more the reviews of the Russian mathematician Fomenko. Whether true or not, I'm pleased for it being aired. So that's just kind of odd. There was something else here in the sidebar that was real odd too. They're trying to make abortion seem real normal to people by using a campaign, and Roman Polanski suggests that people calling him a pedophile is anti-Semitism. And an interesting one, how the 18th century Jewish immigration destroyed Christian England. Would you like to see that one? Go into it and make more of that statement into what it really reality is? Or how about more than 50% of members in this one satanic temple are LGBT sodomites, and they dress up like this? I bet hell is fabulous. Interesting. But so there's just the key points on the idea of ancient Scythians and the ancient Mongols. And like I say, I can't touch upon this. It would be a six-part series. So you can look at this as being the first, or just a partial whenever I go into it more. For all I have to do is go into it more on two other edges here, and it drowns as a concept, as being what you think in your mind as being this giant millions of Mongols. Well, if they swept around and they went up into Russia, and you look in there and there's no Mongolian people, and they were the big dominant factor, what the hell happened? Well, there's some admix here of some people. Dude, that's not... There's some people there that have slightly slanted-eyed features, but no, that is not equating to this thing, and it just poof went away, huh? They grew so big and then poof, like a piece of popcorn, and then went away. Abracadabra. I did a video about abracadabra and magic. We're coming up on Halloween. Usually I do things like that a little more then, and maybe once or twice throughout the year. So you can expect some weird things like that, or werewolves, or vampires, or God knows what coming out of stories. But I'll attach it to a people and another bit of information whenever I do. Anyhow, like, share, and subscribe, and enjoy. And that's it for this one. Moving on.